Hey, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of Open Campus. We've got a really awesome session here today with Annie and Lauren. They're 2 recent data analysts who've transitioned from other careers. We're going to walk through some questions talking about that transition and get their best advice for you all. But before we do that, I want to quickly talk about Open Campus. I saw a lot of the folks here yesterday. Thank you so much for coming. This is a first time ever event for Maven where we're hosting 3 days of live sessions, and we've also opened up our entire course library so you can take courses entirely free. That's for anybody. You can just go to mavenanalytics.io, sign up for an account. You don't need to put in a credit card or anything, and you can take every course that we've ever made. So it's pretty awesome offer. I hope a ton of people will take us up on it and just take advantage of that. Today, we've got 4 sessions starting with Lauren and Annie. Then right after this, we're going to have Dustin Shymek on. He's going to talk about his data jobs trends report. It's amazing, really robust there. After that, Enrique is going to teach you how to build a project portfolio. And then finally, we're going to close the day out with Chris talking about the analytics interview, which you can't get a job without going through that. So that's going to be really great. Tomorrow, we'll have Chris talking about some of the common paths in data analyst versus data scientist, data engineer. So if you're on the fence trying to figure out what is the right path for you, that's a really good session. Then we'll have Kristen on. Kristen's got an amazing background. She's started as a data analyst. I used to work with her over a decade ago. She transitioned into data science, machine learning. She runs her own business. She's a speaker. She's an author. Just a super, super fun person to get inspired by. And she's going to have a totally different perspective. Then we'll have Alice, who she's going to share lessons from over 400 students' data science projects as with her experience as a university professor. And I will close out the week with giving you a step-by-step guide to breaking into data and launching your career. We also had these 4 sessions yesterday going through some of the technical skills, Excel and SQL, Power BI, Python for data analysis, and data visualization. All of those are available on demand. In a minute, once we get into this interview, I'll drop links to that so everybody can register there. And I'll also give you links so you can follow Lauren and Annie. And I definitely recommend that you do that. So thanks everybody for being a part of this. Please go to Maven Analytics and take advantage of the free courses. That's what we really want you to do. So I'm going to kill this share and let's talk about today's session. So we've got Lauren and Annie here. They are new-ish data analysts, much newer than me. So I think they can give you a much better perspective on the current job market, what it was like for them to go through transitioning from a totally different career path. They are also both really amazing content creators that you can learn from all the time on an ongoing basis. So I'm going to actually just drop some links down here where you can follow them into the chat right now. And some other links too, where you can get some information about Open Campus. But I would highly encourage everybody who's on this, go grab those links, go to LinkedIn, TikTok, Medium, and follow these people right now because they just put out amazing content for anybody who is trying to break into a career. With that being said, welcome Annie, welcome Lauren. Thank you guys so much. This is great.
Morning.
Awesome. So let's, I think the best way to do this, we're going to go through a bunch of questions with our 2 guests here. Anybody else who has questions, we'll try to save a little bit of time at the end. In the bottom of your screen, there's a tab specifically for questions. Try to use that and we'll come back to the questions at the end. That's kind of the best way to organize things. And if you see another question that you definitely want answered, you can upvote that too in case we end up getting short on time and have to prioritize. So first off, let's start with Annie with this question. So we hear a lot of people talking about how data careers are just like a really fun, challenging, lucrative, rewarding career, great job security, but then also that it's really hard to break into at first. So like, what do you think about that? And what do you think makes it so hard to initially break into the career?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that I think it kind of depends on what you're doing when you come into it. So I think that people who go the route of getting a degree might have an easier time. But I know probably a lot of people that you talk to and Lauren and I talk to, because Lauren and I went into this without getting a degree in data, are trying to do this kind of do it yourself, take some courses, build a portfolio route to getting in. And so the big barrier there is like you have to do a lot of things. You have to figure out a lot of things. And so because you have to be able to present to the recruiter that you can do the job, even though you've never done the job before. And so I think for if you like have a whole schooling in it, then you can just show a degree or whatever, and you got it. But this way, you have to figure out how to like carefully craft your resume and like carefully talk about it, and like there's like a whole learning curve of things besides the technical skills that you need to learn in order to convey that you do have the skills to do the job. And that is that universe of things is a lot.
Yeah, well said. Lauren, what's kind of your take on that same question?
I think that for a lot of people, especially those of us who are choosing to not go that traditional academic route, you kind of dive into this and there's lots of different directions you can go in terms of learning skills, where you learn them, how you learn them, what order you learn them in. And so you can kind of get bogged down and, in the weeds with what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. So I think that can kind of really challenge you in terms of just figuring out what path to take and how to do it. But I think in addition to that, especially now with data being such like a popular thing to get into, it's a competitive applicant pool. And so trying to figure out how to like make yourself stand out is really, it's really challenging. And so kind of figuring out, the path that you want to take, how to make yourself stand out, and then really like getting yourself to the point where you feel ready enough to apply to jobs, I think is really what can make it challenging.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like I think a lot of people feel like they're not ready when they probably are, and you could start taking some shots a little earlier. That's probably a trend I've seen. I don't know. We all kind of undervalue our skills and like probably could use a little more confidence. I think that's something I've seen over and over again.
Yeah, I think that you also, I mean, like I think that you could continue to take courses and never actually feel like you're ready to get there. And so at some point you kind of just have to decide that like, okay, this is the time. And you're right. I think that you probably could do it a lot earlier than a lot of people tend to.
Yeah. You'll never be done. Like I've been an analyst for a long time. My first analyst job was in 2007, and there's still much more that I could learn than I have already learned. Right. So you're never going to be totally done with it. So yeah, that's really great. Let's go with another question. And Lauren, we can start with you this time. So actually kind of a two-part question. So if you think back to when you were transitioning to an analyst job, and actually let me give the folks a little bit of context here. So Lauren had transitioned to an analyst job. She had a data analyst title. And that was probably like about 2 years ago.
It was actually just about a year. It was about like 14 months ago. So it was even more recent than that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so she had this, had a data analyst role. And then we actually more recently hired her at Maven. She's got this really dynamic role where she is still a data analyst, actually working on projects. She's also helping students learn. She's also working with our enterprise customers. So she's just got this, and she's also a content creator for Maven. So just amazing, dynamic role, super, super fun person. Like I said before, follow her. You really should. You could learn a ton, and the career that she's going to be on is going to be really fun. But yeah, so go back to that point before you got the first analyst role when you're trying to break in. I'd love to hear if there was anything in particular that really tripped you up that that folks could be on the lookout for. And then was there any kind of like a pivotal moment where you figured something out that was like super important that you kind of wished you had known earlier?
Yeah. So I think, going with that first question of things that kind of tripped me up, I kind of want to go back to my answer from the first question. I was that person who took tons and tons of courses. I bought plenty of courses on Udemy. I took tons of Maven courses. I did like probably 4 or 5 different SQL tutorials, and I just never like got past that point. And so, kind of getting held up in that and kind of feeling like I was just never ready enough to move on was a huge one for me. And so I think that kind of what what I finally figured out, and I think Annie actually kind of played a role in this too, was really talking about projects and how to show that you have those skills and you can apply those skills. So once I kind of transitioned into working more on projects and less on learning those skills, I think that really the turning point for me was I participated in one of Maven's challenges. I did the space challenge, and that was the first project that I was really proud of. And I was like, this is something that I put together, and I realized like I do actually have these skills that I have worked so hard to learn for the last 6 months. And so that was kind of like the big turning point for me, was realizing projects are one of the most important things you can do. And then the other thing for me was really that like building a brand. So one of the things that I did back in maybe April or May of last year was I started kind of writing on LinkedIn about my own journey, where I came from, my past career, how it's applying to what I want to do next. And I started really trying to get active on LinkedIn and posting. And I think that for me, one of the things that stands out was after getting my first job and then, kind of starting to talk to the guys at Maven, I had applied for a job with Maven just as a part-time SQL TA. And one of the first things that I was told was that my name was familiar. And so I think that really being able to build that name familiarity and just like that recognition is so useful when you're thinking about kind of moving forward and trying to get a job. So like just thinking about how you can make yourself known and make yourself a desirable candidate.
Yeah, I remember when we were doing that TA search, I think we probably got 100 applicants, and we probably interviewed 3, right? And Lauren was one of them, and she was on the short list because we were like, oh yeah, we hear her talking about her data journey. She's pretty awesome. Like it would be great to get her into the mix any way possible, right? So that's, it's totally resonating with me as literally the hiring manager that was looking to fill a role. And I think one other piece, before I kick this over to Annie, the same question is, I think the projects piece really resonates with me. And that's one that like I wish I had known earlier in my career. Now sitting on the other side of the table as a hiring manager who's took on a lot of analysts, it seems really obvious because there's just thousands and thousands of people that have like SQL, Tableau, Power BI on a resume. And that's really just not particularly valuable. It's like, as a hiring manager, would you rather have a note from someone's mom that says, I promise she's good at Tableau? Or would you rather see an awesome Tableau dashboard that's solving a business problem? Again, it's like, how do you cut to the very front of the line in this really crowded field? And projects are a really good example of that. So yeah, Annie, I'd love to give a little bit of context from, again, before I kick this one over to you on your career and transition. So I first became familiar with Annie when Maven was starting to get active on TikTok and found this TikTok channel by Annie, which was so awesome. And what I loved is from day one, when Annie was starting her journey, before she had any traction, she just started talking into the camera and saying like, I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to figure it out. And it was such a very real depiction of what this journey was like. So anybody who's kind of thinking about this transition as coming into a data career, it's a really, really good channel. And there's the good stuff, and there's like, man, this part's frustrating. I got ghosted. Like I think it's an actual accurate depiction of the process. And had never seen anybody really do it that well before. So that's how we got to know Annie. She successfully transitioned into her data career. And now she's on her second analyst job with a fully remote company, GitLab. So she's anywhere in the world at any given time, which is a pretty awesome benefit. Lauren's the same way at Maven. We're fully remote too. But yeah, Annie, I'd love from your perspective, what were your sort of pitfalls at the beginning? And then was there any kind of major turning point for you too, just like we had Lauren talk about?
Yeah, it's kind of funny having Lauren and I on together because we have a very similar story, and also our stories have influenced each other. And so it's funny to kind of see the parallels, but kind of a lot of the same things that Lauren said. The projects, I definitely at some point was like, I'm not doing any projects. And so when they say, do you have any experience? I can't really say yes to that. But another thing that I think is really helpful to say about the projects was that I think in both times that I've looked for a data analyst job, the first and the second time, I'm not sure how many people looked at my portfolio. I know that some of them did, more so the second round than the first round. But the fact that I had done the projects meant that then when they said, do you have any experience in SQL or do you have any experience in Tableau? I could say, yeah, I just did this project the other day and here's what I did. And so they didn't even have to look at my portfolio. It gave me the confidence and the ability to talk about, yes, I've done a CTE. Yes, I've done this. Yes, I've done that. Without necessarily them having to look at my portfolio. Because a lot of times for entry-level jobs, recruiters, I don't know, they don't really care about the portfolio as much because they just want to know that you have the skills. So being able to say confidently, yes, I've done it, was really helpful. And then I think that the other thing that tripped me up was kind of what I was mentioning before, just like the universe of things, which is, I think, part of the reason why Lauren and I both became content creators, because it was like, I didn't really have any content creators when I was trying to make the switch who were saying, this is what you need to do. And I think I was like halfway through applying to jobs when I'd already like gotten a better strategy by the time I even like discovered some people that were talking about it and like the good stuff that Maven had. But by that point in time, I had done so much work on my own and it had taken so much time and mental effort. And so I think the thing that tripped me up was like, not only do I need to learn SQL and Tableau and Excel, but I also need to learn how to write a resume and a cover letter. And I need to learn how to do a technical interview. And I need to learn what phone screen is. And I need to optimize LinkedIn. It's just and. And I don't think any one of those by itself was very difficult, but the just kind of complete sum of them all together was the really hard thing. And now that I have gone through it, Lauren and I are both content creators, and I just wrote a book about it, and I have a YouTube channel, and I have the TikTok, and I have a blog. And so hopefully it's not as hard for everyone else.
It's awesome. Yeah. So Annie, is the book out?
Nope. I just met with my publisher the other day and they told me it was going to come out in January. And I was like, listen, if it comes out in December, we can ask people like, do you want to get it as like a Christmas present? They can use their end of the year learning and development budget. So as of now, the scheduled date is December 20th. That's coming out.
Awesome. Definitely look for that.
On Amazon. It's got like a cute little cover. It's like a real book.
Awesome. That's really good. I'm so glad you did that. I think being able to kind of share all this advice in a succinct way that people can just get and follow, that's going to be a ton of value. So it's really, really cool that you did that.
Thank you.
I love that you talked about how the project is not just like the magnet to get attention. It's also the interview fodder. It's the stuff you're actually going to talk about in a very concrete way. Like, I did this to solve XYZ business problem, and here's the insights I found, and here's the technical steps I had to go through. Like, that's the stuff as a hiring manager that makes you really confident in somebody. And so for you as an interviewer to be able to talk about that in the interview, it's everything. So that's really great. Fantastic. Let's go to another question here. So you guys have both talked a little bit about building a brand. So I think the value of building a brand for you two is very apparent. Like it's let you elevate above your competition so well. What I'd love to ask for both of you, and let's start with Annie, is anybody who wants to build a personal brand around data, what's some good advice that you would give to be successful there? Because I think, it sounds fun, but it also sounds really daunting and people aren't really sure where to start. So like, what would you tell somebody who wants to do it?
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke on a summit called the Data Careers Summit, which is really good free stuff too. And I said something that a lot of people messaged me about that they said it was really helpful. So I'll say it here. You don't need to be a content creator to have a personal brand. And I think that if you look at me and Lauren and Diane, who transitioned at the same time as us, Chris French, Ian K, a lot of us became content creators as we built our personal brand. And so it can become, I see people conflate the two, that they think they need to become a content creator to have a personal brand. And I simply think those things are not the same. I think that being a content creator has benefited me tremendously, but I think that having a personal brand when you're looking for a job and your end goal is to get a job and not to be a content creator looks very different. It has a lot of the similar elements, but it's it's more about showcasing, essentially, like I look at it as like an extension of your resume. Like you turn your LinkedIn page to creator mode and then have at least a couple of posts that showcase what you're doing and then put them in the featured section. So then when someone comes to your page, you have a good profile photo, you have a couple of good highlighted posts, and then really, I think a lot of value comes out of commenting on other stuff on LinkedIn. People get very overwhelmed with, how am I going to make all this amazing content? But if your goal is to network, to meet people, go ahead and comment on other people's stuff that they're doing amazing things. And then you're going to make friends with them, and then you're going to form that connection through that. And I think that there's more connections to be made through being very active, commenting, just leaving your insight. Oh, I tried this and this didn't work, and here's what I thought. Rather than needing to be the person who's feeding out the content, because that's more of a content creator thing. You can tell me what you think about that, Lauren, but I think that's a really important distinction, and I don't see many people make it.
I totally agree with you. And I think that it's not necessarily like even a distinction that I've thought about myself, but you're right. Like not everybody wants to or can has the time to become a content creator. I think for a lot of us, myself included, it was kind of just something like we fell into. And that's because, I enjoy talking about my own journey. I enjoy talking about the things that I've learned, what I have found useful, what I did that was probably a waste of time in my own journey, but that's not for everybody, and that's okay. So I think that kind of almost pivoting and kind of going more towards your point, I think that we just had a question in the chat about, projects are great, but how do you display them? How do you get people to notice them? I think turning on that creator mode and putting your project portfolio link in your LinkedIn is great. I think that turning your LinkedIn into a portfolio landing page is an awesome idea, where you put all your projects in the featured section. And I think, John, we have a student who, I think it's Clay, who had done that. Yeah. Clay Cooper, who was, he has kind of turned his own LinkedIn into this amazing landing page where people, if he's applying for a job, they can go to his page and they look and they see, wow, look at all these projects that he's done. And I think that that's a really, really great way to kind of build that brand. But I also think, Annie, that the commenting and liking and sharing posts, I think is so useful as well. Just kind of getting your name out there and contributing, but you don't have to be the person who's writing these lengthy posts about stuff. You can also be the people in the comments who are supporting and commenting and just kind of adding on to what's already been shared. And I think that's a great way to kind of build that brand as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so I want to go off script a little bit, not the questions that I shared with you before, because I feel like this is perfect time for it. So I know you guys said you don't have to become content creators. You can just be in the comments, and I completely agree with that. I feel like there's a lot of people that I know just from interacting online, and I feel like I actually have a relationship with them who've kind of done a similar thing, right? But you guys also did do that, and you've done it incredibly well. And for me, I was never a big social media person at all, just really not into it. We started doing it for Maven. I got active starting to teach people, but it was really scary for me at the beginning, putting myself out there. I felt weird about it because I was never the Instagram person. So it felt so weird to me, and I did it. And I think a lot of people get really intimidated by it and sort of scared about kind of doing it at first. I'd love to hear from either of you, if you feel comfortable, did you feel the same way? How did you get over that? What was the process of getting over that? I think that's, that would be really useful for people to hear.
Yeah, I definitely was right there. I'm still, aside from LinkedIn, I think it's so funny now because I haven't posted on Instagram or Facebook or anything for literally years at this point. And so, LinkedIn is my social media for all intents and purposes. And so I think for me, it was very scary, and it was something that I really did just kind of fall into accidentally. I had somebody who I was transitioning with at the same time, and she had come to me and said, hey, would you be interested in kind of co-authoring a couple of articles about how we're doing this together? And I thought it was a great idea. And I'm a person who enjoys writing. And I was like, sure. And I kind of didn't think that anybody would see those articles. And so it was a little bit less scary for me, as I have, my previous position as an occupational therapist, that's LinkedIn isn't something you do. So I was kind of starting from scratch. I had maybe 100 connections. I didn't know what LinkedIn followers were. So, I co-authored these articles. And again, John, I think one of them was, you had actually messaged me about one of them and said, hey, can I share this? Because I had mentioned Maven in it.
It was good. It was great. That was the first time I ever became aware of you, and I was like, "This person is awesome! Like, this is such good advice for somebody. This is just fantastic, you know." So such a good first impression.
That's awesome. I love it. But yeah, so I think that it really, like, that's kind of where I got started. And I think, again, you know, my background as an occupational therapist, a huge part of my life was helping people. And, you know, that was essentially what an OT does. And so I found that being able to kind of give advice and share my own stories and kind of help others in this transition that I already know is hard and scary and can be challenging, that was kind of where I like fell into this niche, and I speak as authentically as I can. And so I think that that is what really makes it comfortable and less scary for me, because I know that I'm not like putting myself out there as this like expert in all things data, but I am putting myself out there as, I have done this, I've been in your shoes, here's what's worked for me.
Yeah, I feel that too, like being authentic instead of trying to present yourself as an expert is a big difference.
Yeah.
I think that if you had come to me at the beginning of when I started doing everything and said, you're going to be a content creator and you're going to switch careers into data analytics, I would have been like, no way. It would have seemed like this mountain of things, because I originally thought I was just going to analyze spreadsheets as a side hustle for $20 an hour, which to anyone listening does not exist, but it was a cute little idea, and it got me on the right track. And I thought maybe a couple hundred people would see my TikTok page and it would last about a month, and then that would be the end of it. So it was never something that I really set out to be. It just kind of took momentum, and I just kept going with the momentum. But something that was helpful was that I didn't expect a lot of people to see it. And so it wasn't like I thought that I was blasting my thoughts out to this whole big wide world. I knew that I was blasting my thoughts out to a very, very small audience. Yeah. And then when it started to gain a little bit of steam, I realized that it was a lot of people who were either just very supportive, who were further ahead, or people who were at kind of a similar stage who just really wanted to know more and to see, like, essentially if it would work for me. So the only times that I really had fear was when I was job searching and it wasn't going very well. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to tell 20,000 people that I failed, that I couldn't get a job. And that was very intimidating. But something else that I've realized now is that if your content isn't very good, people will just scroll by. So like if you're putting out these posts and, you know, you're talking about SQL or something, people who's going to see it are the people who are at your stage or lower, people who are further behind you in the journey or at your step. So you're not going to have like an analytics manager coming onto your post using commas wrong and like calling you out on it.
Yeah.
I actually tell people, like, when you get your first hater, then you've made it, because then like people care enough to say something bad. And so your first post, whether it's on TikTok, a blog, YouTube, LinkedIn, most people won't see it. And then the people who will see it, if they don't like it, they're just going to scroll. They're not even going to get to the end of it, right? Think about your attention span. They're just going to scroll. So I think that's actually a good thing, because it means that it's very, very, very low pressure on you when you start creating, to just get that learning curve. I think on every platform you need to find your voice. Like, I have a different voice when I write a book, when I'm on YouTube, when I'm on TikTok, when I'm on LinkedIn, in a blog. And so you have to find your voice on the platform, and that it's good that you have a small audience to do that.
Yep. Totally. Such good advice from both of you there. What I would tell folks, you know, from my experience is, if you are really intimidated, you know, listen to what Lauren and Annie are saying. There's not as much risk as you think there are, but still you can kind of ease into it. Like, you can start with just following people who are talking about data. Like, that's not scary at all, right? And then one step up from that is start commenting on their posts. Try to add a little bit of value. A comment, again, not super scary. At that point, you realize, like, wow, everybody in this community is actually really welcoming and friendly and trying to help each other and add value. Then after you do that, then maybe you'll feel a little more comfortable actually trying to put out your own posts and content and try to really start building a brand. So you can ease into it. You don't have to go full Lauren, full Annie, and be this prolific content creator on day one. You can kind of just get started. And I think the thing for me is once I started doing it, like, just a tiny bit, it felt way less scary versus like before doing that first one, I was sort of like, this is crazy. this does not seem like a good idea. It's not me. And then it felt really good, and it really wasn't that bad at all. So awesome. I really appreciate you guys going into some detail on that one. So next, let's start with Lauren on this one. So we know technical skills aren't everything, but I do want to ask a little bit about specifically technical skills. What do you think somebody who's transitioning, like, where should they focus first? What skills have been particularly valuable for you? So Lauren, if you could give your perspective on that, that would be great.
One of the things that I and other people on LinkedIn will say is, like, there are 3 big places you need to focus in terms of technical skills. And so Excel is always a place, it's really, I think, the place to start, at least knowing simple formulas and functions, kind of how charts, graphs, pivot tables, things like that work is always going to be helpful. And so many data analyst jobs are primarily in Excel. And so if you have that skill, you are already going to be so in demand. And then, the second skill I would say is SQL. SQL is near and dear to my own heart. I love SQL. It's what I would work in every day if I could. So I think that one is also just so useful. And yes, thanks to you, really. So, so I think that is also a super important one. And it's also, SQL is one of those languages where it's, to me, very intuitive. And so it's, it can do so much. And if you even learn, like, the very, very beginnings of SQL, the big 6 and, like, just really the basics, you are already so far ahead, and you can already do so much with that little information.
Yeah. Lauren, what was your coding experience before SQL? Had you done much coding?
I learned HTML and CSS at one point as, like, front-end web development. Yep. And it's funny because I tried to learn JavaScript and I immediately gave up. I was like, this is far too complex for me. I'm not going to do this anymore. So SQL is the first, I think that's also part of the reason why I love it so much, is, like, SQL is that first language that I got into, and I was like, oh, I understand this and I can do really cool things with this. And so now it's like, it's just my favorite thing to write in. It also helps that, like, at Maven, I do answer most of the SQL questions on our own, discussions. So
great way to learn too. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, and it's like one of my favorite things in the world, especially because I think that, like, when you can, I think that it says a lot about you when you can teach others these skills. So, yep. Technical skills are not everything, but having them is so important. And I think that one way to kind of, like, continue to improve your own skills is to then help others learn. So, but then that last, in terms of technical skills, the last thing I would say is some kind of data visualization. So whether it be Tableau or Power BI, any kind of data viz tool, even if you're going to stick with Excel and continue to work with, learning Excel dashboards, anything like that is going to be something that really makes you stand out in a crowd.
Yeah, that's awesome. What do you think, Annie?
I think that the path that I've taken is different from the actual advice that I give people. I think the advice that I give people is more in line with what Lauren said. I think that especially if you do not have a degree, like, at all, the Excel route is probably the most straightforward, because I think that the most entry-level positions are looking for, like, just people who can use Excel. Which is something that I've noticed recently. That's kind of actually, like, the last 3 months that I've actually picked up on that trend and started giving that advice. But people who've been in the field longer than me tend to agree with me. However, my first job was just using Tableau. I was a Tableau consultant. And then the second job that I got was because I was so specialized in Tableau. And so I'm just starting now to, like, dig into our SQL documentation and stuff, but still primarily using Tableau. But I think that's pretty unusual. But having that really niche knowledge, I will say, like, did get me a job at, like, a really cool company that's very competitive. Also, on the portfolio side of things, I think that you see a lot of Tableau when you're becoming a data analyst, especially if you're doing the DIY route, do it yourself, you're on LinkedIn, because that's the best way to really showcase a project. Like, showcasing a SQL project is, like, very dry. I think that there are interesting ways that you can do it, like have like a summary of the queries that you use and maybe include a screenshot of an interesting one or something. But a Tableau dashboard is far more interesting. However, most of the entry-level jobs that I was going for, were asking if I had SQL experience. Like I think that
Yeah.
either a position is going to want you to use Tableau and you'll use a lot of it, or like you won't really use it at all. And I think there's a lot more positions where you won't really use it at all. But
Yeah.
it's easier to hold on to that Tableau portfolio project because it's such a pretty kind of end state. And so my advice is I tell people, like, do things in Excel, do things in SQL, and then you can kind of finish the project out in Tableau to kind of have a face for the project that then traces back to the other things. But yeah, I'm like a Tableau person, but I think that it's much more niche than the other skills.
Yeah. That's, I think, really good perspectives there. Yeah. I mean, it's somebody who knows Excel and SQL and then either Tableau or Power BI, like that's a fantastically useful person to a business if they have kind of the business acumen, the communication skills, and those other things. Either one of those combos is a fantastic tool set. So yeah, awesome answer from both of you. Let's talk about non-technical skills. So soft skills are also really, really important, and maybe let's not focus so much on things like how to get the job, like marketing yourself, because I think we did a good job with that already. But kind of once you're on the job, what soft skills do you think are really important to be an effective analyst? And like how would you think about that if somebody were thinking about wanting to build some soft skills? And maybe Annie, you can start with this one.
Yeah, I think that honestly, I think being a valuable data analyst is really about the soft skills. And especially if you're a career changer, you're bringing those skills in from your other careers. I find that the real crux of most of the problems that I'm really solving at my job, both jobs every day, is communicating with people, taking in a lot of diverse requirements and distilling them into one project, which is all of these soft skills. And so if you do have prior experience, I think bringing that really strongly into your interviews and having this confidence and this kind of professional way of doing things. And, you can kind of take different questions and think through them critically. You can manage your time, being able to show in meetings that you previously were a manager, you previously did have business experience, you owned a business, you were a supervisor, whatever it was, you ran a lot of clubs when you were in graduate school. You have leadership experience. Because at the end of the day, your manager really just needs to know that you can do your work without them needing to hold your hand. And so the closer of a handle you have on what the business actually needs, the more you could say, this problem needs to get done, and I'm going to solve it myself. Because if your manager consistently just needs to hold your hand, then they can't do their job.
Yeah, that's awesome. Lauren, what would you add for soft skills?
Yeah, I think that generally soft skills, I will agree. I think soft skills are probably as important, if not more important, than learning those technical skills at some point. Everybody can learn the technical skills, right? But you've got these soft skills that are much harder to develop. And so at the top of the list for me, I would say is communication. So not only general communication skills, but can you talk to stakeholders about what they need and figure out exactly what they're asking for? Can you talk to your manager about either what they think is most important, what they think their priority is, what you need help with? Can you talk to other data analysts, and can you communicate to people on different levels with different levels of knowledge or expertise? I think that's like huge number one in terms of soft skills. But I also do think that things like problem solving is so important to be able to and in again, a variety of different kind of situations. Like you might be in a database and kind of need to figure out how to solve a certain problem that you're seeing, that, cleaning data or manipulating or wrangling data, that kind of stuff involves those problem solving skills, or looking at the results that you've got and coming up with recommendations and insights. That's going to involve problem solving skills. So I think that those two are probably my top two in terms of soft skills. But I also think that things like collaboration, being able to work with others, and again, on varying levels of experience and expertise, that's something that we all kind of need to be so cognizant of. And so and that's something that I think that everybody can work on. So I think that maybe those three are my top kind of in the realm of soft skills.
Awesome. Yeah, both of your answers were fantastic. I don't think I would have anything to add if you guys follow that advice to a T. I think you'll be in really good shape. Let's talk about finding job opportunities. So this is another piece of it that, we've talked about the skills to build, how to get yourself a brand that folks will like. When it comes to finding opportunities, like jobs that are available, how would you guys think about that? And Lauren, we can start with you. Like, any good advice there?
Yeah. So I think that this kind of comes down to two separate things. So finding jobs and then applying to jobs. In terms of finding those jobs, I think that LinkedIn is a great place to at least start. I think that actually, Annie, I'll let you talk about this one if you do, and if you don't, I'll come back to it. But I think that Annie was the person who actually like gave some really great insight about how to hone in more on jobs that are like good for you on LinkedIn, as opposed to just going to LinkedIn jobs and searching for data analyst. So I think that there are certain ways on LinkedIn that you can kind of navigate and find jobs that are more appropriate for you. But I think generally in terms of applying to those jobs, cold applying is always going to be harder. So that means like if you click on a job post and you see, you go to whatever the application is, you fill it out, you send it in, there's a good chance you're never going to hear anything back, or you're going to hear back 8 months later saying, sorry, we went with another candidate. So I think that like being able to kind of network and make connections with people in certain companies, following up with people, if you can figure out who the hiring manager is, that's super useful and kind of a really great way to get your foot in the door. And then the other thing that I would think about is like resumes and cover letters. Are you personalizing and customizing your resume for each job? If you're looking at a job posting, make sure you're including the words that they're using in their posting in your resume. Yeah. Make sure that you're really trying to show your output and not just the things that you've done, but like what was your impact in previous jobs, and you make sure you're showing that on your resume. I'm a huge proponent of cover letters, especially again, as a career transitioner. When you're coming out of, again, like a healthcare field or something, and you're applying to jobs in data analysis, there's a good chance hiring managers are going to look at you and say, why in the world are you applying for a data job? You're a healthcare person. So, using a cover letter as an extension of your resume and being able to kind of explain, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I think I would be a good fit. This is how my skills apply, even though they might not be what you're typically expecting. So I think that, resumes and cover letters are a huge part of applying successfully to jobs.
Yeah, that's awesome. As a hiring manager, I've never passed on somebody because they had a cover letter, right? I've also never hired somebody just because of a cover letter, but I've definitely taken a look at someone because they had an interesting cover letter that I might not have if they just sent over a resume, right? So it's, you can't do it if it's the spray and pray method and you're just hitting easy apply on 1,000 jobs. Mm-hmm. But if you're being smart and targeting the jobs that are really good for you, it can be really, really effective. That's awesome. How about you, Annie? Any advice for finding jobs and applying?
Yeah. So I kind of have this progression of my method for things. At first, I think I had this ideal scenario where I'd be able to like pick exactly the kind of job that I wanted and apply for it and it would work. And then that didn't work. And I was very discouraged. So then I tried this kind of spray method of just applying to like 200 jobs. And I used this service called Teal to use a resume tracker so I could track all the places I had applied to. And I applied to over 100. And that didn't work. And I got really discouraged. And I then kind of pivoted my strategy to saying, okay, how can I am a content creator at this point. How can I, make it so that jobs come to me? Because I was getting some recruiters in my inbox, but they were usually not very relevant. And so I started just talking about what I was doing and learning, but like talking about it like I had some knowledge on LinkedIn, like, oh, did you know you can do data cleaning in Tableau or whatever? And actually, those posts are what led me to my first job, because I had posted about, I think, that data cleaning in Tableau, and then somebody who was looking for someone in Tableau, the former vice president of my last company, he had found me and we had gotten connected. And so that's how I found that job. And I found that the leads got a lot more relevant at that point in time when I started talking about what I was actually doing, using appropriate hashtags. And probably when people, that's also when the random applications started to pick up, possibly because people were looking at my profile and I was actually talking about being a data analyst rather than talking about wanting to be a data analyst. I was talking about being a data analyst. So that kind of shift in the content I think really helped. But then for my second job search, I was doing all of that, but then I started doing networking like in person, and I actually had a network that I could reach out to because I had been commenting on other people's posts and other people knew me. And so my second job search was like almost exclusively through people rather than actual applications.
Yep.
And this job that I'm at now, I met the vice president of data and analytics at the Tableau conference. And I had just got up to talk to her after a session that she had done because I was super interested in it. I was not trying to get a job out of her. I was trying to get a job, but I wanted to stay in consulting and she wasn't in it. But I was just like, hey, what you talked about was so interesting. We talked for a while. We connected on LinkedIn. And then when she had a job come open that was using Tableau and she knew that I used it, she reached out to me. And then I was referred. And so I got through the process really quickly. And I got a job that I probably shouldn't have been able to get, otherwise I think I wouldn't have been considered. So that was kind of my steps of like all of the different types of finding jobs. And I know when you're new to the industry, you don't have any connections, but like Lauren and I were talking about, comment on other people's posts, talk to people, build those connections, because a foot in the door is like just infinitely better than this just blind yelling into the void.
Awesome. Yeah. That's definitely resonating with me. We've got one more question here that I think is a really important one to cover. So one of the things that I think scares a lot of people is, so first the whole job search process is intimidating, but then you're like, okay, I'm not getting interviews. And then when I get one, I've never done it before. So I'm like pretty scared as to what this is going to be like. What was that experience like for you? And like, do you have any tips for folks who are kind of hopefully getting their first interview for a data role soon? And Annie, you could start with this one.
Yeah, what was that like for me? I had no idea what I was doing, but what I can tell you now is that there are way more resources than I used. So Data Lemur didn't exist when I was going, but you could practice SQL problems on Data Lemur. There's other I think HackerRank is one. There's like SQL Island and SQL Murder Mystery are things, which those existed. But, and I wrote about this in my book, a whole chapter, use ChatGPT to help you with your job search. I didn't have that, but now you do. Have it ask you common behavioral questions across all industries, across all levels. They ask the same things. Tell me about a challenge you experienced at work. And then actually answer the question back to ChatGPT and have it give you the feedback on it. And you can have it. You can have it help you do so many things, like you can present a project to it and see what it thinks. You can have the normal chit chat. You can have it walk you through a phone screen. You can even have it like talk to you about behavioral questions. Such a massive resource because not only can you talk to it, it can talk back. And it's helpful if you can like browse the content of people like me and stuff to get at least some guidelines to give it, because if you it'll just go off the rails if it's by itself. But if you can give it some concrete guidelines of like, if this is what I'm looking for, I tested it out. It did a great job.
Awesome.
Yeah. The chat there. I can see it.
I think that, no, it's fine. I think that I would agree too with a lot of what Annie's saying. I think that like, really considering the fact that behavioral questions are universal, you can, and even if you're like ChatGPT is such a fantastic resource. And it also is not something I had when I was applying for jobs. But in addition to that, like you can think about questions, when you're thinking about questions like, tell me about a time that you had a conflict with a coworker, tell me about a time that you had to solve a problem. Like you can think about them in what's called the STAR method. So you can think about what the situation was, what the task was, what your action was, and then what the result was. And it's a really great way to kind of format your answer to not only give a comprehensive answer, but also really focus in on what you did and how it solved the problem that you were faced with. So thinking about questions like in that way is a really, really helpful kind of guideline it was helpful for me to have. I would say also, like Annie said, Data Lemur, StrataScratch, LeetCode, HackerRank, all of those are fantastic sites just to purely practice SQL questions. For me, one of the most stressful things was the idea of like a technical assessment and what that would look like. And so being able to kind of practice those questions ahead of time is really, really useful in terms of getting you more comfortable with those, what you might be faced with. And then the last thing I would say is just practice and get feedback. So again, either use ChatGPT, use a friend, use a spouse, use a significant other, whoever it is, get them to ask you questions and get feedback on your answers. Make sure that you're preparing for these and you're not just kind of going in cold and like this is the first time you've ever done it. So I think that all of those things are really useful in terms of when you're kind of in that interview process.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's really good advice from both of you. I think it resonates with me. Somebody told me they were going to be having a job interview tomorrow, and they said, "Hey, wish me luck." And I said, "Well, really, I'm going to wish you good preparation. It's not about luck at all. It's about doing some work ahead of time. Don't just show up to the interview and think you're going to nail it. Like, be really smart about what you want to show off. If you think there's anything that's weak, like use any time you have before that interview to work on it." Annie and Lauren talked about some really, really great resources. There's tons of others out there too. So awesome advice. So we are almost at time, but we could probably take like one or two of these questions. One of these I think was really interesting. I'll put up here. It says I'm answering this, but I don't want to answer it. I want one of you two to answer. It's Kelly asking. She's a bit intimidated by how saturated the job market seems to be, expecting the job hunt to take many months. How do you stay encouraged and motivated during this process? I think this one, given the climate right now, would just be super valuable if you two have any tips here. So whoever feels like they could rock it.
I can take a stab at it. I will say that my job search was a little bit shorter than that, just because I think time-wise, I got in at a very, very good time. So I think there's a couple of things you can do. I would say definitely kind of target industries where you have more, whatever your background is, target an industry that you have a little bit more expertise in so that you kind of have a foot up to begin with. That kind of is helpful in terms of like actually getting interviews and getting your foot in the door. Staying encouraged and motivated. I think part of that is also, leaning on your support system, recognizing that it is a tough job market right now. And so like recognizing that you need to kind of have support in your corner, and also kind of taking breaks when you need it. So not always, you don't have to be applying for 100 jobs every day. Really focus and don't overwhelm yourself. I think that there is a woman on LinkedIn. Her name is Kelly Adams. She is a data analyst. She just got a job a couple months ago, but she's fantastic. And she talked about her own journey in terms of applying and getting a job. So she's somebody great to kind of look into and just see what she said, because I think she had a lot of really great advice in that area.
Yeah, I think that just reminding yourself that other people are going through it, I think that like part of the reason why I talk about the things that I do on my page, my boyfriend doesn't really get it a lot of the time. He's like, why do you talk about this stuff? Like, why do you tell everyone like your business? But for me, it's because I think bringing a voice to something else that a lot of other people are also experiencing. And so when I was miserably failing at getting a job and I was feeling super discouraged, I felt like I was the only one who was having that experience. And now I hear from every single day, somebody in that position, every single day, somebody in that position, And so understanding you're not the only one in that position, and being able to take the breaks to care for yourself. And like this year, the market has been really bad. It seems like this last couple of weeks, it has been speeding up a little bit. But just like be realistic, be kind to yourself, and be like, the market has been really bad this year. And like, it's okay for me to not have it figured out and not be perfect, because even Annie Nelson, who at the time that I was looking for jobs, my first time around, I think I had 30,000 followers, and it still took me months to get a job. And I still almost gave up and told all of those people that I failed. So you are not alone in it.
Awesome. You guys are really have absolutely rocked this session. I'm going to drop a link to the next session here in the chat for anybody else who is interested. We're going to have Dustin Schimek. He is he's one of the creators of the Data Careers Summit that Annie mentioned doing. There's a link there for anybody who wants to join us. Again, for the next week, The entire Maven Analytics library is free. Please get in there, milk that for everything it's worth. Take as many courses as you have time for. We've never done that before, and we're really excited about it. But hope that everybody who joined this got a ton of value. Couldn't have imagined a better session. I think the advice that the two of you gave was really, really fantastic. So thank you so much, Lauren and Annie, for being a part of this. I think you've definitely helped a ton of people, hopefully inspired some folks to take some action and do it in a smart way. And, there's careers being influenced right now. So fantastic job.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this was a blast.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.